I would like to request the presence of our session moderator, Mr. Jacob Martin, Assistant Head of College, Dulwich College in Singapore, to the stage, please, as well as the panelists.
Hello, everybody. We were just, as everyone takes their seats, we were just discussing exactly the pros and cons of this particular slot. So obviously we're delighted that you are all infused with 40 minutes worth of caffeine, which is splendid. But also we are aware that we are the very last line between yourselves and whatever party you intend to attend later on. So we will do our best to take you through this really important topic. And the idea we have in terms of the structure is we will have a brief introduction for each of us personally, and then I'll start with some very general remarks about the areas that we're going to touch on. And then I'll ask each of the panelists to give you some benefits of their wisdom and their experience in these areas. And we would then really very much like to encourage a question and answer session. And I know that certainly two of the panelists I've spoken to are very keen to, for any controversial questions that you may have in the audience, to bring those to the fore. So perhaps I'll start just by very briefly introducing myself. My name is Jacob Martin, and I lead an international school in Singapore. 2,700 students, 3 years old to 18. And I'm also here representing a global educational project which is run out of MIT, Boston in the USA. So, we've got sound back, and I'm sorry I had to shout at you for the first 12 minutes, I do apologize. I'd just like to pass the mic round now. I don't know if the others are working. Use this one. And allow each of the panelists just to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll go around and I'll give each of them 2 or 3 minutes.
Start? Okay. Hello. My name is William Davila. I'm the head of corporate relations of IE University in Madrid, Spain. Sorry, you here? My perspective is more higher education. Of course, we're more. We have a bunch of undergraduate degrees, of course, and graduate degrees, and we have had experience a lot in areas of including technology in the different programs that we have, and I will tell you how. No? As you mentioned, literacy is an evolutionary concept. It depends on the era in which we are, and in order to survive nowadays, there's a group of skills that we need to manage, right? If you see the ranking of the World Economic Forum about the top skills that will be required during the next decade, I think that in the top, the first 2 have to do with solving complex problems and also critical thinking. It will be impossible, among others, right? But it will be impossible to deal with it or manage those skills if you don't have a basis of managing certain, what we call here, literacies. Dealing with what we call the digital or cyber literacy, I think it's something that is mandatory nowadays. It has to do with managing certain tools, of course, technological tools that we have, but also has to do with how to find the information in the sea of information that we have around, and how to analyze that information that we get. Data literacy, I find it a little bit more challenging. It's complicated because it's more complex and require more abstract thinking. I think that the data literacy that we need to develop is a consequence of the digital literacy that we mentioned, but it will require more or different approaches. No? And then when you were referring about spatial literacy, it's true. I mean, our kids, they never have used a map, and things are going to get even more complicated because just as an anecdote, just recently I had this conversation with the people of SpaceX, and they are launching this new constellation of satellites. And these satellites, one of the features that they have is they have sensors. You imagine like having an iPhone in space that they're going to tell you in real time hundreds of things about the place where you are, not only where you are, but whatever, the temperature, hundreds of data that you're going to receive about the place where you are. How are you going to interpret that, or what are you going to do with that? It's something that we have to learn, but that's just something that a conversation that I had some days ago. In our case, our challenge, on one hand, has been, if we integrate all this technology into the program that we have, it's not that we can have online technology and offline technology. Everything has to be together. You, of course, I think probably somebody will discuss, but I think there's quite consensus about the uses of online education. But it's not that you have online and offline. Everything has to be, in my perspective, together. Even in a face-to-face or traditional classroom, you need to combine it with technology or online kind of education in order to encourage the development of these literacies that we are talking here. But one of the challenges has been how the professor cope with this new technology that is there. Nowadays, even the professor, they have to self-learn many of these skills in order to apply it to the environment in which they are. So that's one of the challenges. We have been researching and experimenting with different situations and technology. We recently created a classroom that includes a hardware piece and also a piece of software that does two interesting things. One has to do with the technology percent, how to deliver the classes on a kind of new online environment, meaning so far the online experience has been you in front of the computer and the student in front of the computer. Well, how do you change that, and how you make it more, or how make it easier for the professors to move around and to transmit the emotion and so on. I invite you to check it out. But also one of the things that the software is doing is that it's reading the emotions of the participants in that class, and can give the professor or the instructor, real-time information about what the participants or students are feeling in certain points. So there's a bunch of data there that also need to be interpreted somehow, and that has to do with developing this data kind of literacy in participant and in the professor. I'm extending too much, so sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jenny Pownell, and I'm the owner and managing director of the tutoring company in Australia. We deliver both home-based tutoring, so that's one-on-one personalised tuition in students' homes, and we also deliver online tutoring internationally through our platform. Now, the interest for me in particular, I'm a teacher and special needs educator, and when I got involved in tutoring, it was because as a teacher I felt that a lot of my students who had tutoring were being delivered poor quality tutoring. And as a special needs educator, the interest for me was the fact that in Australian schools, it's estimated that about 20% of our students across the board in all classes actually have an undiagnosed learning difficulty. Now, I would imagine that's probably similar worldwide, and that's quite alarming for us as educators, that in fact so many of our students are in our classrooms with an undiagnosed learning disability. Now, for a tutoring company, this is even probably more important because a lot of those students with learning difficulties ultimately become the students who seek tutoring. So for my tutors, the proportion of their students who have undiagnosed learning difficulties is probably something closer to 60 or even 70%. Now, when we're talking about these three literacies in particular, when you consider that we also do online tutoring and we're also talking about digital literacy, then we have particular issues that we need to be concerned about and particular things that we need to be aware of. Interestingly, for example, today we've spoken very briefly about navigating and using spatial literacy. If you think about how many people in this room, for example, might have an app on their phone that enables them to walk around the streets of a new city. Many years ago, that was done by a paper map. Now, if we were to ask many students these days if they could use a paper map to walk around a city, they probably can't do it, which would suggest that, in fact, they have poor spatial literacy skills. And what we also need to be very careful of and very mindful of is the fact that a lot of these three particular literacies that we're talking about today are very intertwined, and what might look like an area for a student is one area of difficulty may in fact be an area in another literacy that are in fact where they are having difficulty with, because it can mask. So where it might look like a student has got poor data literacy skills, it may in fact be that their spatial literacy skills are poor instead. We also run programs for disengaged youth and those that are at risk of reoffending. And one of the keys for preventing them from reoffending, of course, is education, because if they are educated, they are more likely to be accepted into a course which is going to provide them with greater opportunity to be employed. And again, when we're talking about digital literacy, we have to be very careful about the kind of programs that we are delivering, because they might not have access to digital devices, they might not have an ability to understand how to use digital devices. We've got to be very, very, very careful about making the assumption that people know how to use digital devices. I've also got to be very careful when I'm thinking of the tutors that I employ. We can't assume that they understand how to use their computer or even know how to effectively use the program to deliver online tutoring, for example. So I'll probably pass on and perhaps come back and talk more later.
Thanks. Hello. Yeah, hi, I'm Adil Mateen. We are running a TV channel, the first education TV channel in UAE. And recently we have started Design Thinking Center and Technology. And we have started in collaboration with the Cambridge curriculum, and it is approved by the Sharjah government. So we have started first Design Thinking and a Technology Center in James Cambridge School, Sharjah. And we have integrated it in the curriculum, so it's a new subject introduced in the school from grade 4th onwards. Coming back to the topic today, as all of already mentioned about the 4th Industrial Revolution, and I don't think it is the right platform to talk about what is the data literacy, what is the spatial literacy, and what is the cyber literacy. We just wanted to talk about what is the need of these literacies and why we are using it. Why we need to learn about it and what is the main significance of these literacies, especially in the forum of education when we are talking about the future education. So let me just go through a brief that what is the data, because as rightly mentioned, data as is a new technology started with the 4th Industrial Revolution. It's a German government initiative, then approved by, recognized by World Economic Forum. Data will be king, and when we have lots and lots of data every minute, every second, you need to manage it, structure it, and connect it with the machine for machine learning. So that integration has somehow required a structured data. To do your data structuring using the algorithm, which is again known as the artificial intelligence, is the need of an hour. This is the need of the fourth industrial revolution. And from this, when education point comes, a new terms arrive, that is the education 4.0. So fourth industrial revolution is not only the revolution in the industry, as well as the revolution in the education, which we have seen in the previous lectures, that there is a need of educational reform. When we say educational reform, it means everything. It need to be started from the reform in the curriculum, style of teaching, way of teaching. So this is a time where we need to acquire, and there are many centers and such kind of a new curriculum introduced already. Dubai has started. And we all are not focusing on the methodology and all those things, but we are focusing hardcore on the technology and using the, like we are teaching design thinking, but teaching design thinking with communication design tools. So by the time we start training our school students from 4th grade onwards, they should learn the basic technology, how to structure its data, how to save your data, how to learn the cyber physical system using the robotic technology, so that in future the jobs and the requirements and these learnings will be used for integrating the combinations of all these things. I think this is enough for this introduction, and maybe I pass on.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, I'm Indrajit Bhattacharya. I'm the director at Quality Council of India. So this is an organization which has been created by industry associations, the top three, the CII, ASSOCHAM and FICCI. And on the other hand, 50% is owned by Ministry of Commerce. So we are in the space of accreditation and assessments. We have 3 boards. One board is for the hospitals, accreditation of hospitals. Then the other one is for accreditation of laboratories. And I come from the accreditation board for education and training. So in this, we have focused on the accreditation for schools, which we went through in India by state-wise. We have done for the Delhi government, for Maharashtra, for Arunachal Pradesh we are doing, and for Odisha it's going on. And in this part of the world, in UAE, we have the Indian School of Muscat and few other schools which have been accredited by Quality Council of India. And we are also entering into the higher education institute space because, as you may be aware, out of the 40,000 institutes in higher education, only 10,000 are accredited. So the government came out with government-allied organizations which are in the space of accreditation to take up this area, and we have moving on that. So on this topic of data literacy, my co-panelists have already talked in great detail, and the previous speaker, Soumya, did a very good job about the data literacy part. But what I will talk is a little different, is on the application in the space of industries, because my vertical is looking after the quality interventions in the industry sector, typically the MSME sector, micro, small and medium enterprise. And post implementation of lean manufacturing, which is removal of waste, we have to ride on the industry 4.0 wave. But the most critical thing as I speak now is the personal data privacy bill, which is a hot topic now, which the movement started a couple of years back from the Sri Krishna committee. And as I speak, on 4th of December, this got a cabinet approval nod from the cabinet. And day before yesterday, it was supposed to be tabled on the parliament. That is 14th, for the bill to become an act. It is very crucial because nobody wants to divulge with the private data, so personal data. And same thing happens with the industries also, who have their data converted to information, and from that information to wisdom. So what are the nuances in this? If I just read it out for you, what it means to the consumer is data can be processed or shared by any entity or only after consent. And safeguards, which includes penalties introduced to prevent misuse of personal data, and all data to be categorized under 3 heads, which is general, sensitive, and critical. And the government and regulatory role is government will have the power to obtain any user's non-personal data from companies. The bill mandates that all financial and critical data has to be stored in India, and the sensitive data has to be stored in India but can be processed outside with consent. So there is a tweak which has been done, which says that a data which is of national interest, and even if it is personal and sensitive, can be taken by the government. So this has created an uproar, and I do not know whether it was actually tabled on 14th of December in the parliament or not because of this. And what companies have to do is social media firms to formulate a voluntary verification process for data. The sharing data without consent will entail a fine of 15 crore or 4% of the global turnover, and the data breach of inaction will entail a fine of 5 crores or 2% of global turnover. So this is going to have a lot of ripple effect, and we are going to see a lot of implications on this bill after it becomes an act. I'll say much more after my turn comes.
Thank you. So, yes, if the fines are that big, then CEOs also need to have some data literacy skills. So, okay, so I'd like all of the panelists to have another opportunity. I think two of the areas which, well, one of them is an assumption. In everything that's been said so far, there is an underlying assumption, which I think I would just like perhaps the panelists to explore a little bit, which is the assumption is that these literacies, these three literacies, can be taught, that they can be developed, that you can take somebody who has poor cyber literacy and provide them with better levels of cyber literacy. That's one assumption. I wonder if we all might say something about that. Also, the other piece is that Professor Yong Zhao, who there's not really much he doesn't know about assessment, one of the things he often says is that if you want to assess what a culture or a society regards as important, you look at what they measure, how they measure that thing, and if they measure that thing. And I certainly, as yet, have not seen, apart from in some elements of curriculum design, solid ways of assessing some of these three skills to look for development in young people or indeed in adults. For example, if you're a university professor who I'm interested to know whether or not, for example, that they, part of their appraisal or their assessment of the effectiveness of a professor or a student is based in any of these three literacies. So perhaps if we all have a few more minutes on either of those or anything else you would like to bring up, and then we'll open up for questions. So it was, the assumption here is that these three literacies can and should, by implication, be taught effectively, and also something about how those things may be measured, or the progress in those skills can be measured, if that is possible. We also drifted wonderfully into the area of controversy. I think in terms of our personal freedoms, these three literacies, in terms of us being aware of our rights, will be a transformative area for young people to grow up understanding. So, should we start here?
Yeah, well, in general terms, I think yes, they can be taught and it should be. But there are differences between the three literacies that we are talking here. I find the like digital literacy is something that more than be taught is more how can I use it in a proper manner? How can I find the information right? How can I have the critical thinking required to use that information in a good way? Nowadays, you find everybody in any level of education, when they go to the classroom, most of them have their phones there or their computer. Of course, still we have professors that can say, close your computer, shut down your phone, whatever. But I think that I mean, what for? I mean, just let it be and try to complement it. Try to complement your education, your program, your course with that. And but most of the content can be can be acquired there. I mean, the content is there, it's in the information is there, so the role of the professor there is different. It's about context more than the content itself. So that digital, let's say, literacy is implied in all this process. Data literacy is a little bit different. What I think that I'm not sure if that's something that can be developed since when people are small, because at the end it requires, it's a complex thing that I don't know if it's going to be. I mean, you can have basic skills on that, but really also depend where we're talking about. We're talking about data literacy, because most of the data discussion right now has to do with basic statistics more than big data combinations. But yeah, you need certain skills on that, but it's going to be more complex over time to develop that kind of literacy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to drive the point that another important thing is happening is the National Education Policy 2019, where a lot of reforms in education is going to be brought in the National Education Policy, which is under fine-tuning in our country. So earlier it was a 600-page report, a policy which came out. So that has been tweaked by many people, and a lot of wisdom has gone inside. And now they are bringing in the final policy, which the main driver has to be from the moving out from the traditional learning. One has to bring in skill-based education, which has to be retrofitted with classroom education, and a lot of data science has to be brought in, so that it has to be evidence-based learning and data-driven. So what the previous speaker, Soumya, already showed you in the slides, the importance of data science. So I'll just extend it further. Data science is not Python, it is not R, it is not SQL, it is not statistics, it is not experiments, it is not Tableau, it is not visualization, it is not Spark, it is not TensorFlow. It is using above tools and techniques, and if required, inventing new tools and techniques to solve a problem using data in a scientific way. Why is this so importance given? Because the normal full-time jobs are all drying up. If you see the trend, the full-time jobs are all drying up, and we have to see to it that there is constant employability rather than employment. So what is kicking in is something called gig economy. So for which we have to bring in data and able to make the students understand the use of data and criticality of data, and always look out for upskilling and reskilling, and so that unlearn and relearn, that kind of mode one has to get in. So the new education policy, which India is supposed to come out with very shortly, it is going to build on all that, and QCI is going to is a part of that, to roll out that national education policy.
Hi. Actually, coming back to the point of literacies and education, and as you have, I think, mentioned many times the word controversy, I think controversy is not the right word for this thing. Reason being, it's a transition phase from one era to a new era. We are entering into an age of the second phase of digital revolution. Industry 4.0 is nothing but it's a second stage of the digital revolution. So it's a transition phase. So I just give you two use case studies, very short examples. Before this coming to the UAE, I'm having 15 years of hardcore news broadcasting experience. We started news broadcasting with emulsion-based tapes for the coverage and storage, and the maintaining library was a big challenge. Then media asset management storages came into the market, and we started using those storage. But still the data was very fragmented and uncategorized, and it was very difficult to link between the data of even a particular requirement. Now, in this era of big data and digitization and cyber literacies, a new technology that is known as the news tracker, it is using by Reuters news agency, and Sky News has already started using for gathering the social media content and the automated AI-based headlines and the news stories is already started generated by these TV channels. So this is a transition phase from the emulsion-based tape to media set management storage to a AI-based news thing. But still, it's a transition. Therefore, there will be many such word-like controversies there because there is no media ethics. If you search of Google about these new AI in the news system, media ethics is lacking because our AI system still not reached to that point where the algorithm can distinguish between the essence of news. So it's like you being like a chemist, you know the cost of everything and value of nothing. So to become or to have the doctorate in the AI, it will take time. So I don't think it should call a controversy. Similarly, a new invention by Intel that is going to be launched in the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, that is a NeoFace. It's a new software name by the Intel. NeoFace is going to monitor near real-time face recognition data of every visitor that is supposed to be 300,000 visitors in the Olympic, including the participants, guests, and everything. Again, it's a transition phase. We are controlling the crime using the security system and face recognition technology. But it's still in the transition phase. As the future is, we should control the crime rather than working on the criminal psychology of the criminal. So moral education is now being mandatory in the UAE as part of the curriculum, where we are not teaching only the data literacy or the cyber literacy, but rather than to control the crime, we should focus also on the criminal psychology. So it's a bit challenge using the transition phase. So I don't think controversy is the right word. Yes, you can say it's require 5G, and 5G test we all know was very unsuccessful using the health hazard of the radiation that developed through the 5G. But Expo 2020, we are working on the Ericsson with the Etisalat partner where the 5G is going to launch. So this is, yes, a controversy, but still it's a transition phase where the radiation bandwidth control can be minimized in the later stages.
I'm going to answer the question from a completely different viewpoint. So the first part of the question was, can the literacies be taught? And the answer is definitely yes. But the key is that instruction has to be very explicit. And this is where it gets very difficult, because if I was to give you a very simple example, if we consider somebody who perhaps is having difficulty constructing an Excel spreadsheet on their computer, and they then have to also construct a graph from that spreadsheet. That skill is actually involving all of the three digital, spatial, and data literacy skills to do that one spreadsheet and to do the graph. Now, if we don't know which particular area or which particular literacy that they're actually having difficulty with, then instructing them how to actually do that can be quite difficult. And this is a lot harder to do. Trying to be explicit is a lot more difficult than what it sounds, but it is the key to being effective in teaching somebody any skill really, whether it be these literacies or anything else. And the second part was about assessment. Again, the key to assessment is that assessment should be in many forms. So we can assess somebody's ability in each of these literacy areas, but we have to be able to give them the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding in a number of different ways. The issues come where there is only one form of assessment, and it's not multi-forms of assessment.
Maybe we could pass on to the question and
Yes.
answers. Okay.
I'll do that now. As you can see, I'm being rushed. So I'd like to allow at least 2 or 3 questions. Are there any questions in the... Okay, we start there. Thank you very much.
One thing which I kind of missed out is, according to the panel, what is the definition of literacy? In the sense that literacy is not knowing about something, at least in this context, when you say data literacy, that means, is that something where I use the data in my cognitive abilities to take decisions? So the literacy in the conventional sense is knowing things, right? You call somebody as a literate or illiterate. So what is the definition of literacy? That's question number one. Second, for me, this topic, the panel heading itself is kind of little self-limiting in my mind, because it is kind of looking towards a cognitive sense of how a child is developing. What about self-literacy? What about a child discovering himself or herself? Isn't that the most important literacy, quote unquote, which educator has to look out for?
So first, the definition about data literacy, that is able to read, able to work, able to analyze, and able to argue with data. That is the book definition of data literacy, right? On the second part of the cognitive abilities of the child to pick up strings from the cyber space on literacy, that evolves over a period of time, like the moderator mentioned, because there is a wide amount of information available, and to evolve is to understand which is the correct information, which is wrong information, which has to be picked up and which has to be put in the right perspective.
Thank you. There were another here, just in front.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for the wonderful insights to all the panel members. My question is very specific to Mr. William Valeria. I believe you are from IE. Considering the amount of work that has gone into creating the classroom of the future of IE, I would like to know what initiatives are taken at your business school in creating an engaged classroom of the future.
An English classroom of the future.
An engaged classroom of the future. Engaged.
Well, this classroom of the future, you mentioned, we call it the WOW room. There is the window on the world classroom, with the idea of, well, it's experimenting, to see, the traditional online kind of, with the computer there, how can we make it more engagement, actually? And one of there have been many university and business schools that have experience with that. There are some approaches where they are turning education into a kind of edutainment concept, where the course becomes more a documentary or more a show, right? So to facilitate kind of the engagement. That could be an approach, and the classroom are turning more into a TV set where, there's a kind of TV production there. In our case, the methodology that we use is more interactive. Since our origin is more a business school, we use the case methodology as a tradition that requires that the professor moderates more than a lecture. It's more an interaction there, and question and answer, so the classroom that we made is made for that purpose, right? It's made for the purpose of facilitating the interaction between everyone. It's not one way. It's not the professor talking to the audience. Is interaction between the professor, the audience itself, themselves. Actually, the classroom allows to build all the classrooms similar and create mirror classroom, so you can be there and there probably an audience in the other side interacting with all of you at the same time than the professor. So, but that's something that we're trying in our courses. We like to focus more on a blended kind of approach. It's not online or pure face-to-face. It's everything combined. And since, for example, one example of the changes in methodologies, In the past, the case methodology supposed to be, you read what is in the case, you debate about what is in the case, and that's it. Now, with the new technology and so on, you cannot focus on that. You have to open up the case, and you can find information online, and you can bring it also to the experience in the classroom. So that interaction is what could make it more engagement.
All
Can
right.
I just
Thank
add?
you.
Can I just add? So there's one more.
Quickly.
Yeah, there's one more technology, which is the 3D technology, which all of you know, AR, VR solutions, immersive learning, for which there is a stall outside. But the technology is moved beyond. MIT professor has come out with the 4th dimension, because we are talking about spatial literacy. It is a 4D product, which is giving the aspect of field, which is called as holo suit. So if you wear the suit, you can actually feel the object on 3-dimensional. You can actually feel how it feels. And it has immense use, because you can see that a cadaver is normally not available for all the medical students learning to cut. But here you can cut a digital cadaver, and actually the blood will flow. And that kind of space, you can give the actual feeling to the surgeon and understand surgery better.
Thank you. We have a lot of awards that we need to do, so we should stop there. I'm sorry. Do we have time for one question? If it's quick? No. I'm very sorry. So I just want to end by thanking everybody in the
Thank you
panel. I
very
really
much.
appreciate your time. Thank you.